And hello everyone, welcome back to a new NIM tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll be talking about FFIs or foreign function interfaces. Now to simplify this whole thing, pretty much let's say you have a C++ file, and let's actually bring that over here. This C++ file has a sum CPP, which takes in two values and then it returns a value, and a speak CPP, which just console logs we say and then whatever is here. Now, this is pretty awesome because if you have a library you might want to interop with in nim, you can, because you can simply now just call their functions in nim. Now, nim allows you to interface with C, C++, Objective-C, and JavaScript, so you can use all of those with nim pretty much out of the box. However, note that JavaScript interfacing cannot be mixed with C, C++, or Objective-C, because C, C++, and Objective-C are all backwards compatible, whilst JavaScript is a whole different language. So you might remember that if you want to compile to JavaScript, it's nim.js main.nim. That compiles to JavaScript. However, to compile to C++, you'll need CPP. But C, C++, and OC are pretty much all going to compile down to the same thing, while JavaScript will compile down to a language. So just take note that whilst you can use C and C++ together inside of the same nim program, you cannot do it with JavaScript. So let's start off simple before we actually move on to calling stuff from the file. So we start off by going procedure printf. So we want to call printf from C. We have format, which is the C string. We specify a C string instead of a regular string because it will require you to pass in a C type string. And it returns a C int. And then we just need to specify import C, var args, header, which is stdio.h. Now, stdio is pretty much one of C's libraries. This header file here could kind of also be the method C++ file we have here. It's the same thing, so methods CPP. The only difference is method CPP isn't provided by default when you have like C or C++ installed, where stdio.h is provided by default with C. It's one of its standard libraries. And then we just specify discardable, so we can discard it. Let's just maybe make it a little bit smaller so it fits better on one line. Now, one reason you should take note of why this is a C string and not a regular nim string is because in C, you actually have const char asterisk. So this right here is what a string is in C. So we don't have the usual string like we'd have in other languages. It is this round right here. That is why we specify C string, because it is unique to C. So let's actually use this by going print. So now we're calling this we just defined, which is getting it from stdio. And we say my name is %s and I am %d years old. And we just add a \n so it goes to the next line. Then you can specify Jack as well as 25. Now if we run this, nim-c main.nim, let's just put a dash order so it auto runs as well. Bring this up. We get my name is Jack and I am 25 years old. But if this was just a regular string, you'd notice we don't actually even get an output here, and we actually did this time get an error. And it is really as simple as that to call a function from C. Now note that this right here is only really important when we don't specify what we're trying to call. For example, if we specified import C, printf, then we don't need to call this printf, we can just call this C echo, and it will still work perfectly fine. But if we do not specify that right there, then it won't know which function to actually get, and it will just throw you an error. So by specifying the actual function here, you can call it whatever you want to make it simple for you. And because it is discardable, if you want to, you can discard this, because this will actually return an integer or a C int. So if you don't want the value, you can simply discard it. Alright, so now let's try and use one of the methods from here with what we just learned. So let's start off with speak, because I think this one will be a little bit easier. So let's go here and we can actually, so we have reference, throw that on the side. We go and define a procedure, call it speak. We specify a name, which is the value right there, and that will be of type C-string. Then we provide an import CPP, which is speak CPP. So that would be the one right there. And we have a header which contains the file. Now note, if you are using C++ and you have a header file, we currently don't actually have a header file, we just have a C++ file, then this will need to be the header file and not the C++ file. But because we don't have a header file, we're just using the C++ file, we can just specify C++ methods. And just note here, you want to go like that, so you can specify the values we pass in here is the values that's going on in here. Now that we have that, we can simply call speak rock and roll. Now when we run this, oh, and we got an error because I ran it with C, we need to specify CPP, and it works perfectly fine. Note, if it turns out that you still want to use C in your code, you can still do it by, let's go like that. It's the same code we had, it's just from the actual lesson. It will still work perfectly fine, so you can still use C stuff inside of a C++ compiled program, just so you know. And there we go, so we say rock and roll. Now let's move on to this sum CPP here. So we go procedure, sum CPP, just calling it the same, just so we have a fun example to work with. We have int x, int y, and then it returns a cint. And in here we have import CPP, and we specify sum CPP at that. Now that we have that, we can say let res, which will type int, and if we want to convert the cint into an int, we just specify int, and we say sum CPP 10 and 15, and then we can just echo out result $res. And my bad again, working with two languages makes me a little confused. just swap that around like that. And now if we run this and specify CPP, then we get 25. And if you were to specify cints here, it would work perfectly fine. In this case, switching between them doesn't really change anything, including with the last int right here. So you can easily switch between them in this case because it's not using a cint, it's more closer to a regular int. However, it is still safer to always instead specify cint because they can work with each other, but it's a little bit safer just to specify the actual type you're looking for. Now sometimes you want to define a type from C inside of nim. To do that, you can do something similar to type. We have ctime, which is equal to an int 64. In this case, it's rather simple what its actual type is. Then we go procedure time, pass in our argument, pointer ctime, and it also returns ctime. This is from import C, header is time.h. However, you might also see some people do this. I've heard this is to specify that you want it from the standard library and not from your local system. However, note if you do have a time.h right here, it will opt to use this time.h instead of the one that is provided by the system. But you might see that just something you might want to take note of. In this case, I'm just going to ignore it, but you might want to prefer to use this one. Now that we have that, we can pretty much just echo out time nil, or actually just put this inside of let seconds, and then echo out seconds. Then when we run that, we'll get the amount of seconds as provided by the time method in time.h. Now this is very simple. It's really just very easily mixable with nim. But what if you had something a little bit more difficult, like the tm method in C? I'm just going to copy this right here, so I don't have to type that whole thing out. The tm method, or the tm type in C, is pretty much a struct that contains all of these values right here. Now, this is when you break it down. So we are going to try and bring this into our nim code. So let's define a new type, call it tm, and it will immediately import C and struct tm. So that struct I just showed you, we're importing that type here. Then we have our header, which is also from time.h. And this will be of type object, because a struct in nim will simply translate into an object. Then we go tm min, which is cint, tm hour, which is cint. And you can specify the rest of the details as well if you wanted. I'm going to skip that for now. Then it's define procedure local time, and it will be time ptr c time, and return a ptr tm, which also import C header time.h. Alright, now that we have our seconds here already, we can just go let tm is equal to local time. We pass in the address of our seconds, and we just echo out tm.tm hour, put a colon there, and then tm.tm min. And there should be a colon here, my bad. Now that we have that, if we run this, we get 8:13, which if we take a look at the time down here, it is in fact 8:13. So we just brought this whole local time method all the way down from C to be used in our nim program. So knowing how to use FFI is incredibly powerful. And I'm going to link this in the description as well, because if it was not for this right here, I would not have been able to understand FFI at all. So I highly recommend everyone else should go read this as well if you're more interested in learning about FFI. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next nim tutorial.